Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for Earthbound, Speculating the World and World Building the Present. I'm Vera Petukhova, founder of RipSpace, a platform that's dedicated to future-oriented artistic practice and emergent paradigm. Thank you to Spectra Studio and their entire team for hosting us and for their generous collaboration in bringing this program to life. This program emerged from ongoing conversations with artists thinking critically about world building, a term with its own lineage relating to storytelling, science fiction, and gaming that has influenced a lot of contemporary art and digital culture. For years, the digital felt elsewhere, a frontier of virtual space we could enter and exit. Today, we are native to network space, and yet as AI scales, the infrastructures beneath it, the servers, cooling systems, land use, mineral extraction, press our material existence back into view. So now the cloud has weight, computation has geography, the fantasy of immaterial cyberspace is giving way to increasingly an ecological and planetary condition. And if world building once meant constructing speculative environments, we now confront the reality that our technical systems are actively building the world itself. In that sense, we are becoming more earthbound, not less, called to reckon with the material, environmental, and social ground of the futures we imagine. And now I will give an introduction to our first panel presentation. 𝐼𝐸𝐚𝐬 and 𝐤𝐚 both work at the intersection of pedagogy, computation, and contemporary image culture. In their classrooms, creative coding is not just a technical skill, but a way of thinking and approach to systems, language, and authorship. Today, they reflect on what it means to teach creative coding in a moment when AI operates simultaneously as collaborator, shortcut, and prosthetic. Through a performative dialogue, 𝐼𝐸𝐚𝐬 and 𝐤𝐚 will unpack these questions, moving between lived classroom experience and broader cultural shifts to consider how pedagogy adapts when the very logic of coding is being rewritten in real time. And a little bit about each of them. 𝐼𝐸𝐚𝐬 𝐈𝐦𝐻 is a writer, web designer, developer, and experimental educator based in Los Angeles and oftentimes in Amsterdam. Her second book, entitled 𝐼𝐸𝐚𝐬 and Webland, Detouring UX Destinies, was recently published by Set Margins. She codes to challenge the ideology of user-friendliness, support cultural platforms, respond to political gems, and socialize. Currently, she is pursuing a PhD in media arts plus practice at the University of Southern California. chen Yi is a Chinese artist, designer, and creative technologist based in Los Angeles. With training in architecture, she creates digital, physical, and social spaces that examine the relationship between technology and systems of power. As director of technology at the Processing Foundation, chen leads projects, programs, and partnerships that bridge open source technology, creative practice, and community. She has taught creative coding courses as an adjunct professor in USC's Media Arts and Practice program since 2020. She's also served as P5JS lead at the Processing Foundation, overseeing the design, development, and community of P5JS, an open source tool for accessible, inclusive, creative coding with more than 5 million users worldwide. And with that, I will hand the mic over to you.
Thank you.
You ready?
Hi. What's more important than two women talking about teaching creative coding in the age of AI?
Part 1, Big Dreams, Handmade Code.
September 25, 2024. I'm on a 110 freeway driving to teach a class at USC IMAP, where the first thing I'll do is give feedback to my students on their recently submitted websites. We just wrapped up an assignment that focused on developing alternative communication platforms using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and playing around with databases.
October 15th, 2024. I'm sitting in the adjunct professor office at USC School of Cinematic Arts, going through students' work. This is my 9th semester teaching IMO 300, Introduction to Creative Web Programming. Sometimes, I find it interesting that most of the intro to creative coding courses at art and tech university programs in the US are taught by adjuncts. In another parallel universe, I might be in a performance dialogue talking about that topic, but not today. The first assignment is to make weekly PFAC sketches generating algorithmic videos and audio. Most students have never done coding or creative coding before. Wait, what is creative coding actually to you?
Thanks for asking. To me, creative coding is adjacent to what I call conceptual web development, during which each web component responds to its technical and visual surrounding. The neighboring components, developers thinking through the software limitations, and the resulting design reflecting that thinking process, as well as the context in which the website was made. For the previously mentioned assignment that technically focused on learning how databases work, I specifically asked my students to not build a generic chat bubble that allows multiple users to talk, or polish the looks of conventional chat apps, such as by using Comic Sans instead of Helvetica. Instead, I asked them to think about new ways of communicating through the web. What linguistic limitations can also be a part of web? I now want to highlight a student's work. Well, we have to improvise a little bit, but basically you were supposed to see a website that is kind of like a chat app. And the student created a website which asks you, what is your elephant in the room? But you have to kind of activate the bot inside of the website to trigger that question towards you. So you have to kind of answer the correct, you have to give the correct answers. And once you do that, or as you're doing it, as you're interacting with this app, it's also kind of projecting your answers in the background and at the same time exposing the shape of an elephant. And then when it finally asks you if you want to talk about it or not, then you have to say yes. And then when you say yes, it shows you the collection of everybody's elephants in the room that contributed to this website. And I think it's a really beautiful example because it's very specific, but it's also depicting my students' idea and the fact that they feel like nobody is talking about the elephant in the room. And I think this is not the kind of communication that a social media platform would enable for users, because it makes users think about what they're saying and reflect on their personal experiences. A user you're talking to might play this kind of game, but the platform will not. What about you, Q? What is creative coding to you?
Code is material, not to ship a product, not to optimize the system, to generate form, to create intention, to explore what's possible, and maybe who we are. We use P5 to sketch the way painters sketch, not to finish something, but to find something. The software, the hand, the not yet knowing what you are making, the no utility, just expression. Perhaps that's creative coding. I brought the books here that are fundamental to creative coding. In the screen that you just saw here, it's a fictional student's work making a sketch at week 2 of the class, Intro to Creative Web Programming. In that assignment, the students are asked to make a conditional statement work, which is evals. And you can see here the students have commented interesting things. The first line, I don't know why this works, but it does. Try this first, this variable, equals plus equals 0.1. This is too fast. Try this, plus equals to 0.001, too slow. Equals to 0.01, this might feel right. If statement, mouse, sine, cosine, different versions, version, draw a grid, fail to code, version 2, random dots, feel like noise, version 3, this, keeping this. The elephant is a struggle we don't share. A fellow elephant haver, what do you think?
Part 2, Alex Chen's.
The disruption moment. When did AI enter your classroom and how did you feel?
It is March 2025. It is no news that my students have been using ChatGPT for a while, except that now it is no longer an elephant in the room. However, this time, things feel different and very much look like some sort of a conceptual crisis. My guts are telling me that we've entered a conceptual crisis for sure. What that means is that my assignment prompts don't seem exciting anymore. The classroom feels cold, and I can't tell whether they're using this time to code or whether they have coded the whole website already. Whenever I walk around to individually check in with everyone, it looks like they've become quick at putting the code up on their screens in order to convince me that they're for sure coding. I saw a Netflix tab on someone's browser more than once already. All to say, I feel a crisis of my own, creatively challenged, but also unprepared to respond to this crisis. I told my students it's okay to use AI, hoping they would share their methodologies with me. So far, what that brought was asking me to fix AI's bug for them, a bug usually resulting from ambitious technologies I didn't ask them to utilize in their project. It looks like the code has become an image. ChatGPT's seamless user interface, allowing them to copy and paste code in a millisecond, has reduced the need for them to understand what the hell the code is saying and doing. It looks like the availability of the code's explanation promised by AI successfully encouraged them to copy the code now and learn what it does later. This is what a conceptual crisis looks like from a UX perspective. From a visual perspective, a conceptual crisis erases the creator's identity and background, their unique experiences in life, their thinking and expression. From a visual perspective, a conceptual crisis in creative coding looks like this. So this is an interview. It was for an assignment in which my students had to interview somebody from the fourth term. And the colors change from website to website. The questions too, a little bit. And this one is a little bit more ambitious. When I inspect the code of these websites, the comments indicate the structure of the page, header, body, footer, no frustration or students' thinking process. I miss the times when they would rebel against the semantic web or its conventions. I miss the times when they would say, fuck header, fuck body, fuck footer, because it's the same like coding a division and giving it a name such as a flower.
August 26, 2025. I'm still in the adjunct office at USC School of Cinematic Arts, about to start my first class of the semester. This is my 10th semester teaching IMO 300, Intro to Creative Web Programming. It feels the same. However, a lot had changed. I just came back from maternity leave. My son is learning to eat. Cursor became a big thing. How do I feel? Curious, excited, guilty about being excited, afraid, behind, already behind. AI is changing how we code, fundamentally, permanently. And I just had a baby. I was gone for 6 months. I came back. Everything had shifted. Replaceable, not just me, the whole coding thing. What is code now? What is the point of teaching coding? What am I now? I always ask the student what website they like to make the first class. The most popular answer is always a portfolio site. So in the first class of this semester, I asked different AI platforms the same question. Make a portfolio website for a cool student at the media arts practice program at USC. For some reason, no matter which platform I go, it gives me a portfolio site for someone called 𝐼𝐸𝐴𝐿𝑦𝐻. Indigo purple, gradient, neon green. 𝐼𝐸𝐻, media arts and practice at USC, creative technologist exploring the intersection of interactive media, generative art, and immersive storytelling. Crafting digital experience that blur the line between art and technology. Project is for code, creativity, and human connection. Here's some code with very, very green color. Again, this website is made with just one prompt, no additional adjustment afterwards. This is made by Lovable, I believe. Okay. Another site, 𝐼𝐦𝐚𝐬𝐚 again. Creating at the intersection of art and technology. Projects, echoes of memory, digital erosion, liminal spaces, synaptic garden, blending pixel with purpose.
Love letter to the mess.
December 5th, 2025. I'm sketching out a few projects for motherhood with code. My files are messy. Lines commented out everywhere. I jump around. I uncomment old code and it smudges into new code in ways I didn't plan. And that combination becomes idea. Around the same time, my son, who's actually here, is learning to eat solid food. Mashed sweet potatoes everywhere. His face, his hair, the table, the floor. I keep wanting to clean it up, but the mess is the point. His hands need to learn what food feels like, how hard to squeeze, when to let go. You can't learn it clean. December 15th, I started writing an essay about all of this, all the mess before the algorithm found me. It turned out to be a love letter to the math. In the P5 editor, the default file name is called sketch.js, not script.js, not app.js, sketch.js. When you sketch with pencil, you draw a line. Decide it's wrong, draw another next to it. Few versions of the same edge coexist on the page because you are searching. You smudge by accident, and the smudge become part of the form. Painters call it pentimental, old marks showing through the new ones. Sometimes those ghost lines are more interesting than what you draw on top. Sketching with code works the same way. The structure of your file shows how you thought through the problem. What do you try first? Where you searched? What do you circle back to? The mess is your thinking made visible. I used to say, I didn't find the algorithm found me. I'd start with one idea and end up somewhere completely different because the sketching showed me something I wasn't looking for. The for loop that created an unexpected rhythm, the parameter I changed and forgot to change it back, merging to everything else and becoming the whole piece. Can you plan for that? AI generates clean code. Even when you prompt it to be experimental, it generates a clean version of experimental. No commented out attempts coexisting. No pentimental of old tries showing through. No accidental smudges that become intentional. Just clean execution of a clear prompt. Clean sounds good. Clean is fast. Fast is valuable. But when we optimize away the slow, difficult, non-linear process of sketching, we're not just saving time. We're eliminating the space where thinking happens. My son is learning to use a spoon now. Still messy, but differently. He's developing precision, learning to angle it just right to control the motion from bowl to mouth. But he also experiments. Sometimes he holds the spoon upside down to see what happens. Sometimes he abandons it entirely and goes back to his hands because they work better for that particular food. The mess looks different now, but it's still there. It's still necessary. Does the mess ever really go away, or does it just change shape? Donna Haraway has the idea. Stay with the trouble. Don't resolve completely too quickly. Sit with that difficulty, because that's where knowledge is made. When I ask students to sit with a bug instead of fixing it instantly, I'm asking them to stay with the trouble. AI makes it very hard to stay with the trouble. It wants to resolve. It wants to clean. It wants to give you the answer before you ever felt the question. It makes trouble disappear before you even know it was yours. What does your mess look like? Do you miss the mess?
I have a lot to say about the mess. In May 2025, I happened to be writing my second book, Somewhere in the Desert, and researching the computational mess that is inherent to cyberfeminist history, with a very bad Wi-Fi, by the way. For those of you who don't know, cyberfeminism, in my definition, was an early web era when women were using the internet and the browser as a means to expand on their feminist practices, rather than translate the existing ones in the digital realm. The possibilities of the internet, they thought, could bring about new forms of expression. Expression could bring them closer to each other. Connecting to each other could lead to forming a global virtual community that could survive female oppression together. This vision was joined by many, making cyberfeminism a solid movement to follow, and further depicting not only the need for connection, but also the scale and variety of the oppression. The cyberfeminist peak happened during the 90s, when the internet and the browser still required its users to contribute to the internet on an infrastructural level. The cyberfeminist examples of that time include making and publishing blogs, which collected not only their word art, but also their experimentation with identity and sexuality. This massive self-publishing movement started the webring trend, which creators of the web used as a component through which they could reference each other's websites and sustain the network of web creators. It also caused the publishing lords to panic into believing that this could smash their publishing gates. Who gets to be published would no longer be determined by them, the publishing lords, but by the cyberfeminists themselves. The cyberfeminists did not hesitate to move forward with their ideas. The rise of social media platforms reversed the direction of the panic and slowly started dimming the cyberfeminist spirit. The users no longer had to code to exist online, but fill in the skeleton profiles generated for them after making an account. The search engine optimization pushed the cyberfeminist blogs to the bottom of the search results, as their code was not written to be findable by the queries typed on the tech conglomerate search engine, further depicting the cyberfeminist belief that the website will not be found by the user who serves the web, but the one who fills the web. This, I believe, is a more respectful perception of the user. Digging deeper into the archives, the main critique on cyberfeminism can be found that it was messy. It responded to the commercial industry's threats on its spirit instantly without crafting a long-term tactical response. It was criticized for not having a clear goal nor a leader, which, as it was predicted, would further bring its demise. But with every such critique, cyberfeminism pushed against being defined, as definition would erase the mess that it embraced as the core of its spirit. In my book, I also reflect on technical messiness through Tara McPherson's overview of messiness in the history of computation. I now want to read from my book. At the beginning of Tara's book, called Feminist in a Software Lab, McPherson fiercely writes about her necessity to embrace the messiness, messy entanglements with matter and each other when working in the design field of technology, software, and code. She states that messiness never made it in the history of computation, thanks to Unix, a family of multitasking, multi-user computer operating systems, and the first operating system to embrace modularity as a means of controlling its own complexity. It may be unclear how McPherson imagines messiness functioning in the world of computation and design, but her vision shapes along in the process of criticizing Unix. One of Unix design principles was to avoid involving other programs so that their internals don't mess around. On top of this escape, the process of generalization was built, which separates the object from context, cause from effect, and level from level. Due to its scale, Unix only dealt with its own problems and grew to be an encapsulated system. Furthermore, to avoid problems, its guides kept stressing the importance of writing with clarity and simplicity. Amidst criticizing Unix modularity design, McPherson quotes Eric S. Raymond. Modularity in software design was meant to decrease global complexity and cleanly separate one neighbor from another. And the question I want us to think about is, when the industry forces us to adapt to yet another technological and social hype cycle too soon, how else could one be but messy?
It is so refreshing to hear about cyberfeminism in a conversation about AI. You have no idea. You just don't know. So in practice, how did you navigate the dynamic between handmade code and AI-generated code?
I think AI can be useful to reduce the technical burden when concepts are a priority. Alongside my book launch events, I've been giving radical coding workshops, such as building websites that work when the Wi-Fi or electricity shuts down, or websites that rip off institutional branding identity in order to help the users appear as represented by those institutions when there is not enough time to develop these relationships in order to meet the requirements for obtaining a citizenship upgrade. I now want to share a workshop that I will give next month in Berlin called Tap to Go, Redesigning the Self-Deportation Apps. As states increasingly turn to mobile technology to incentivize and administer voluntary migration return programs, a new kind of UX has emerged, one that must simultaneously function as a bureaucratic instrument, a marketing campaign, and a persuasion machine. These apps promise dignity and choice while encoding urgency, surveillance, and consequence into every interaction. This workshop examines government-issued self-deportation applications as objects of design critique and socio-technical conditions that emerge from their advertising rigor. Drawing on methods from speculative design and, as I call it, conceptual web development, participants will conduct a close reading of the aesthetic and rhetorical strategies embedded in voluntary return interfaces, their color palettes, onboarding flows, copywriting, iconography, and the emotional labor they perform on users navigating fear, uncertainty, and loss. How do these apps construct the user? What fantasies of safety and belonging do they sell? And what remains invisible in the interface? The legal fine print, the data trails, the years of exclusion that follow a single tap? In response to the intellectual stimulation, participants will develop counter-proposals, alternative UX flows, speculative ad campaigns, or critical mock-ups that expose, subvert, or reimagine what a voluntary return might look like and feel if designed with radical transparency, care, or dissent. As you can see, self-deportation apps are not a myth and are real and are for real. I think it's time to repurpose the powers of AI for critical and political projects. What about you, Q?
Some of my students use AI for scaffolding and keep the exploratory path for themselves. Their file shows it. Clean AI generative foundation with messy human thinking layered on top. Others prompt for everything, including the creative decisions. Even if the results are similar, the process is what matters. But will they ever really know the difference? Last week, a student's code was generating circles in a way they didn't expect. AI could have fixed it immediately. I asked them to sit with that instead, sit with the bug. They kept the bug, built on top. The accident become intentional. That's the part that can be outsourced, thinking towards something you can't see yet. When students skip the sketching, they are not just skipping process. They are skipping the part where they figure out how their experience translates into them. And that part is slow. It's supposed to be slow. Fall 2025, my 11th semester, I now include an assignment where students vibe code a new website every week. I want them to learn both ways, because the question was never really AI or no AI. It was always where and how did your thinking live in the work? So on the left side of the screen, you can see a website made by student 𝐂𝐫𝐞, who showcased all the assignment made by the students that semester. And the right side is is a student's work who students portfolio website of their class, 𝐼𝐸 300, which include different projects, P5, narrative, etc. And on the top, you can see there's also web coding included. So in the web coding part, they also write reflection on what their critical thoughts they have about web codings. Thank you, Kelly, for make both sides and allowing me to show this work.
So what's more important than two women talking about teaching creative coding in the age of AI?
The students' website in part 1 are real, but their names have been fictionalized.
Yes, we got their consent to show their websites.
The website in part 2, including Alex Chen's, were generated by Cloud, ReZero, ChatGPT, and Lovable.
𝐻𝐬 and Q are still teaching creative coding.
I also want to give a big shout out to Carrie Chen for giving a lot of theory inspiration for my essay.
Thank you. Is it on time? Yeah. Do we have time?
We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Anyone have a question?
Yeah?
Go ahead.
I immediately thought about hand-holding metaphor, but I don't know if it's solid enough. When I was thinking about that, I still think about my son learning to eat and learning to walk. So if the fact before he has to walk independently, hand-holding has always been very helpful. And I also think about for AI and creative coding, like AI could be interesting hand-holding for the early stage when the students don't know how to debug, because that AI could be a adjunct professor that stays with them 24/7, that answers every question about what is for loop, why do I have to have semicolon instead of comma here. So my immediate reaction was hand-holding, but I don't know if it's right. What do you think?
I don't really have a metaphor. Sorry. But I would say, I was always advising my students to use it afterwards. So something like a friend would be suitable to say here, but a friend with whom it takes time to develop a friendship, not just like an immediate friend. And I often advise my students to use AI in the third project. So to still kind of gain the basic coding skills and understanding of programming languages at first. And then you can invite your friends to help you build more ambitious projects once the concepts are pretty strong.
Yeah, and while being hand-held, you still need to be you, because you are still the most important part of the project. While someone offers you a hand, you still need to be the person, take the walk. And I think that's very essential when we're navigating the relationship with AI.
I think we have time for one more question. Okay. I don't think I can see anything, but
Thank you.
I don't think I see a hand. Thank you. Up next. Thank you, Q and 𝐻𝐬. And up next, we have Secret Server Club.